NVIDIA just announced new graphics cards. These 3000 series Ampere cards build on the features we first saw with the 2000 series Turing cards. So, what new features do they add? What kind of performance can we expect? And maybe most importantly, how much are these gonna cost? Welcome to a mini episode of Upscaled, our explainer show where we break down the tech that makes your graphics shiny. To give a quick recap, NVIDIA launched its current generation of cards 2 years ago. These Turing or RTX cards include the flagship 2080 Ti, mainstream cards like the 2060 Super, and entry-level models like the 1660. These cards were pretty revolutionary. In addition to the processing typical of any GPU, these Turing cards added 2 bits of specialized hardware. RT cores enabled ray tracing, a method for hyper-realistic lighting and shadows borrowed from high-end computer animation, and Turing cores enabled AI-based features like DLSS, which uses machine learning to upscale graphics to higher resolution. If you want any more info on how any of these actually work, go check out our other videos. We actually launched this series with a piece on ray tracing. Ray tracing and DLSS could produce some pretty incredible graphics. Well, eventually. The first generation of DLSS was kind of muddy and weird. But 2 years later, there's only about a dozen games out there that support either of these two features. And these cards were expensive. The previous generation flagship, the 1080 Ti, retailed for $699, but the 2080 Ti launched at $1,199. The cost was personally part of the reason that I held off on getting an RTX Turing card. It felt like, why pay double the money for a feature that I'm going to use in maybe 4 games I actually care about playing? Quick digression, before the 2000 series cards launched, I actually interviewed a pair of AMD graphics card engineers. They told me they thought ray tracing and DLSS were pretty impressive, but that these new graphic techniques weren't gonna really catch on until they were in the consoles. Which brings us to today. NVIDIA has new GPUs, but maybe more importantly, the Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5 are slated to launch this winter, both powered by AMD GPUs, but both promising hardware-level ray tracing support and maybe, just maybe, some kind of AI-based upscaling. So we may see NVIDIA's custom hardware mattering in a lot more games very soon, and in fact, they just announced their RTX graphics features are in fact coming to Fortnite. What about the cards themselves? Well, the biggest surprise here may actually be the new top-line card. You see, for years, the highest end of NVIDIA's graphics cards was usually the blank 80 Ti model, the 980 Ti, 1080 Ti, you get it, with maybe a semi-professional, super high-end Titan card thrown in for an absurd amount of money. Well, despite that, rumors had been swirling for months here that this generation would include a new 3090 card, and indeed it does. So, how does this matter? Well, it doesn't. It's just a renaming of what would have been the 3080 Ti or 3000 series Titan. But this is still a beast of a card. The 3090 will include 24 gigabytes of GDDR6X memory, a huge boost from the 11 gigabytes of its predecessor, and for CUDA cores, the parts of an NVIDIA GPU that handle rasterization or traditional non-ray traced graphics, the 3090 boasts an incredible 10,496 cores, a massive 250% jump from the 2080 Ti's 4,352 cores. And I say incredible because I'm not sure I believe it. It seems like NVIDIA is changing the way they count CUDA cores. It claims these new redesigned cores can perform 2 calculations per clock cycle, but with that, it appears like they're counting each one of them as 2 separate cores. If that's true, you could think of the 3090 as really having 5,248 cores, each of which can shade at twice the rate. Now, as long as this can deliver the increased performance they are promising, and it seems like it very well may, then it doesn't really matter. The thing is, CUDA cores are grouped together and managed by a streaming multiprocessor, or SM unit, that issues instructions to the group of cores. And for non-gaming work like computation or video rendering, having more of those SM units can really matter. We tried to count, and it seems like the 3090 probably has about 82 SM units, or just about 25% more than the 2080 Ti's 68. Now, this may not end up mattering. It might still have great performance in these areas, but until we can do some tests and benchmarks, I'm a little apprehensive. The TLDR is that when NVIDIA is bragging about its teraflops performance, which again is essentially math per second, that might only apply to gaming, and not to the many other kinds of computation that people use GPUs for. We did reach out to NVIDIA for clarification, but we haven't heard back yet. Anyways, this new math has the 3080 matching the old flagship 2080 Ti for CUDA cores, by which I mean NVIDIA is saying it has twice as many, at 8,704, and that is paired with 10 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory. That is 1 gigabyte less than the old 2080 Ti, but in terms of memory bandwidth, or the amount of data it can move per second, it's actually higher at 760 gigabytes per second versus the Ti's 616. These boosted specs actually don't tell the full story. These cards are NVIDIA's first consumer devices manufactured on an 8 nanometer manufacturing process, down from 12 nanometers. Now remember, a smaller manufacturing process usually helps with efficiency. But before anyone jumps in and points out how AMD is on a 7 nanometer process, remember, at this point, these names are mostly marketing nonsense. They barely correspond to any actual features on the chip, and 8 nanometers is plenty good enough. This greater efficiency lets the cards run a bit faster than the last generation, and that combined with the architecture improvements means in early tests we're seeing the 3080 between 60 and 80% faster than the 2080, which also means it is handily faster than the 2080 Ti, and definitely means the 3090 looks to be the fastest graphics card around by a wide margin. And things get really interesting with the 3070, a $500 card which NVIDIA says should be as fast as the 2080 Ti, which remember launched for $1,200. We haven't heard anything about a 3060 yet, but I'm hoping for a $350 to $400 card which is as fast as the current 2080. NVIDIA also says the RT and Tensor cores in these cards have been improved as well and should offer double performance, but we haven't seen any actual performance numbers or stats on the actual number of cores, so we'll have to wait and see. But these benefits come with a cost, both in terms of dollars and power. The 3080 will be launching at $700, and the 3090 will premiere at an eye-watering $1,500. And they are going to use a lot of electricity and require a custom 12-pin power connector to supply it. The 3090 will draw 350 watts of power, and the 3080 just slightly less at 320. NVIDIA is recommending at minimum a 750 watt power supply if you want to put either of these cards in your desktop. Though, to be fair, the 3070 is a slightly more reasonable 650 watts. So what about AMD? Well, in addition to building the GPUs in the new Xbox and PlayStation, we are still expecting the long-rumored desktop Big Navi GPU, though details are still pretty light on the ground. It'll probably support some kind of hardware-based ray tracing, and AMD is claiming a 50% improvement in performance per watt. But that is currently all we know, and it should be pointed out that based on what NVIDIA said today, they are claiming a 90% improvement in performance per watt. And they were already ahead. At best, Big Navi is probably going to be competing with the 3080, not the 3090. And because we have no examples out there to look at, we have no idea how it'll perform at ray tracing or any of these other bits of advanced graphics tech. AMD has probably been holding back to see what NVIDIA launched and how they priced their new cards so they can try to come in and undercut them. And if they can, they may be in a decent spot, at least in the mid-range. But if you were hoping for an RTX killer from AMD, I wouldn't be holding my breath. Regardless of what AMD does, these Ampere cards are powerhouses and a huge generational leap in terms of performance. Personally, if it does turn out to have good video rendering performance, I may need to snap up a 3090. Those 24 gigabytes of VRAM are just too good to pass up. I'm currently using a Radeon 7, which was kind of an evolutionary dead-end graphics card just because its 16 gigabytes of VRAM plays so well with programs like DaVinci Resolve. The next few months are going to be an exciting time for graphics cards, and we will be back with a ton more updates as we get the news on Big Navi and these NVIDIA cards and the consoles and whatever the heck Intel is cooking up. So be sure to stay tuned and let us know what graphics card you're currently using. Is this the generation that might finally convince you to upgrade? And do features like ray tracing or DLSS actually matter to you, or is it just about raw performance? Sound off in the comments and let us know. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time. Also, I got some kittens.